The stagecoach lurched to a stop in front of the weathered mercantile in Kelton, Utah, and Victoria Daniels stepped down into the dusty street with nothing but a carpet bag and the kind of fear that had settled into her bones like permanent winter. It was June of 1883, and the scorching heat reflecting off the desert floor made everything shimmer like a mirage. But she knew this place was real. This chance was real, even if the knot in her stomach told her she was making a terrible mistake coming west alone. She had answered an advertisement for a seamstress position at the general store, fleeing Chicago and a past she refused to let define her future. The proprietor, Mrs. Helen Carmichael, was a stern woman with kind eyes who showed Victoria to the small room above the shop that would serve as her new home. The space was sparse but clean, with a window overlooking the main street where she could watch the comings and goings of this small railroad town that had sprung up along the Central Pacific Line. Victoria spent her first 3 days with her head down, stitching shirts and mending trousers, barely speaking to anyone beyond what was necessary for transactions. She kept her auburn hair pinned tightly beneath a modest bonnet, her dresses buttoned to her throat despite the oppressive heat, and her eyes carefully averted whenever men entered the shop. Mrs. Carmichael noticed but said nothing, though Victoria caught her concerned glances more than once. On the 4th day, a tall cowboy walked into the mercantile with dust coating his boots and the easy confidence of a man comfortable in his own skin. Isaac Vaughn had just brought a small herd through from Nevada, and he needed supplies before heading back to the ranch where he worked as foreman. He was 26 years old, with sun-darkened skin, dark brown hair that touched his collar, and gray eyes that seemed to take in everything without judgment. Victoria was measuring out thread behind the counter when he approached, his spurs jingling softly with each step. She felt herself tense automatically, her shoulders drawing up, her breathing becoming shallow. He noticed the change in her posture and deliberately kept his distance, speaking in a low, gentle voice that somehow made her think of summer rain. "Afternoon, miss. I need some tobacco, a pound of coffee, and whatever ammunition you have for a Winchester." She nodded without meeting his eyes and began gathering his items with hands that trembled slightly. Isaac watched her careful movements, the way she seemed to make herself smaller, and something in his chest tightened with an emotion he could not quite name. When she placed his goods on the counter and finally looked up to state his total, he saw that her eyes were a remarkable shade of green, like new grass after spring rain. But they held shadows that had nothing to do with the dim interior of the shop. "$3.40, she said quietly. He counted out the money carefully, making sure not to let his fingers brush hers when he placed the coins on the counter rather than in her outstretched palm. She noticed this small courtesy, and something flickered across her face, surprise perhaps, or the faintest hint of gratitude. "Thank you, miss. You new to Kelton?" "Yes, sir. Just arrived a few days ago." "Well, welcome. It is a good town, small but decent folk for the most part." "You need anything? Mrs. Carmichael here. She looks after people." Victoria nodded again, and Isaac collected his supplies and left, but he found himself thinking about those green eyes and that bone-deep wariness for the rest of the day. He came back to the mercantile 3 days later, ostensibly for more supplies, though in truth he had no pressing need. Victoria was alone in the shop when he entered, Mrs. Carmichael having gone to check on an order at the freight office. She looked up from the dress she was hemming, and he saw that flash of unease again, the way her entire body went still like a rabbit sensing a predator. "Afternoon, miss. I hope business is treating you well." "It is fine, thank you. What can I help you with today?" He made up a need for buttons. Of all things, claiming he had lost several from his work shirt and could not sew worth a damn himself. This made her lips quirk in what might have been the beginning of a smile, though it died before it fully formed. She showed him several options, and he chose a set of plain brass buttons, watching as she wrapped them in brown paper with precise, efficient movements. "You do beautiful work," he said, gesturing to the dress she had been altering. "That stitching is finer than anything I have seen. I have been sewing since I was young. It is the one thing I know I can do well." There was something in the way she said it, a hint of hard-won pride mixed with resignation, that made Isaac want to know her story. But he was raised to respect privacy, so he simply thanked her, paid for the buttons, and left her in peace. Over the next 2 weeks, Isaac found reasons to visit the mercantile with increasing frequency. He needed leather for his saddle, then nails for a repair at the ranch, then a new bandana because his old one was supposedly beyond saving. Mrs. Carmichael began giving him knowing looks, but Victoria remained politely distant, always professional, never quite meeting his eyes for more than a moment. The other ranch hands teased him mercilessly. His closest friend, a cowboy named Samuel Torres, cornered him one evening at the bunkhouse and demanded to know why their foreman had suddenly become so concerned with shopping. "There is a woman," Isaac admitted, sitting on his bunk and pulling off his boots. "The new seamstress at Carmichael's place. And what is stopping you from courting her proper? She is scared, Sam. Not of this place or the work, but of something. Someone hurt her bad, I would wager my horse on it. She flinches when anyone gets too close, keeps herself locked up tight like she is waiting for the next blow to fall." Samuel's expression grew serious. "You think she is running from someone? Maybe. Or maybe just from memories. Either way, I cannot just walk up and ask to take her to a dance. She would bolt like a spooked mare." "So what are you going to do?" Isaac lay back on the thin mattress and stared at the rough ceiling. "Be patient. Let her get used to me. Show her that not all men are whatever bastard made her so afraid." It was easier said than done. Victoria's walls were high and thick, built from pain and self-preservation. But Isaac was nothing if not persistent, and he had learned patience working with wild horses that needed gentling rather than breaking. He began timing his visits for the quieter parts of the day, when the shop was empty and Victoria seemed slightly less on edge. He never stood too close, never made sudden movements, and always kept his voice soft and even. He started bringing small gifts that could not be construed as improper. A pretty river stone he found that was almost the same green as her eyes. A wildflower he claimed reminded him of the embroidery on a dress he had seen her making. Victoria did not know what to make of Isaac Vaughn. She had known men her entire life, had suffered at the hands of a man who was supposed to love and protect her, and she had learned that kindness was often just a mask for cruelty. But Isaac seemed different. He never pushed, never demanded, never even asked questions about her past. He simply existed in her orbit like a steady, unthreatening presence, and despite every instinct screaming at her to maintain her distance, she found herself beginning to look forward to his visits. One particularly hot afternoon in late July, Victoria was struggling to move a heavy bolt of fabric that had just been delivered. The cloth was thick canvas intended for wagon covers, and it was far heavier than she had anticipated. She was trying to drag it across the floor when Isaac walked in and immediately moved to help. "Let me get that for you." He stepped forward quickly, reaching out toward her, and Victoria's body reacted before her mind could catch up. She flinched backward sharply, her arms coming up defensively, her eyes going wide with sudden fear. Isaac froze mid-motion, his hand still extended, and for a long moment they simply stared at each other, Then he slowly lowered his hand and took a deliberate step back. "I am sorry. I should not have moved so fast. I was just going to help with the fabric." Victoria's heart was hammering in her chest, adrenaline flooding her system even though her rational mind knew she was in no danger. She lowered her arms slowly, mortification flooding through her. "I apologize. I do not know what came over me." "You have nothing to apologize for," Isaac said firmly. "A person's reactions are their own, born from their own experiences. I startled you. That is on me." He waited until she nodded, then very carefully and obviously telegraphing his movements, he bent and lifted the bolt of canvas with ease, carrying it to where she indicated against the back wall. When he straightened, he made sure to keep several feet of distance between them. "Where would you like the rest of these supplies?" They worked in silence for several minutes, Isaac following her directions to arrange the new inventory while Victoria pretended her hands were not still shaking. When everything was sorted, he turned to leave, then paused at the door. "Miss Daniels, I want you to know something. I understand if you cannot trust me, if you cannot trust any man after whatever happened to you. That is your right and your choice. But I need you to know that I would never, ever raise a hand to you in anger. I would cut off my own arm before I would strike a woman." Victoria felt tears prick her eyes, which made her angry at herself because she hated crying, hated showing any weakness. "Why do you care?" Isaac turned to face her fully, his gray eyes serious and clear. "Because you deserve to feel safe. Because you deserve to know that not everyone will hurt you. And because," he paused, seeming to weigh his next words carefully, "because I think you are remarkable, and I would very much like the chance to know you better if you would ever be willing." He left before she could respond, the door closing softly behind him, and Victoria stood alone in the mercantile with tears streaming down her face for the first time since she had arrived in Kelton. That night, lying in her small room above the shop, Victoria allowed herself to think about her past for the first time in weeks. She had been married at 18 to Robert Hayes, a businessman in Chicago who had seemed charming and attentive during their brief courtship. Her parents had approved the match enthusiastically, pleased their daughter was marrying well. The first time he hit her was 3 months after the wedding, a backhanded slap for what he claimed was disrespect when she questioned his spending. The second time was a week later. After that, she stopped counting. For 2 years she endured his violence, his manipulation, his systematic destruction of her confidence and spirit. She might have stayed forever, believing she had nowhere else to go, if her younger sister had not visited and seen the bruises Victoria could no longer fully hide. Her sister had helped her escape, had given her the money for a ticket west and information about the job in Kelton. Victoria had not looked back, had not left any forwarding information, and she lived in constant low-grade fear that somehow Robert would find her and drag her back to Chicago. But Isaac's words kept echoing in her mind. He had seen her fear, her damage, and he had not been repulsed or angry. He had been gentle and understanding, and had promised something she had not dared to hope for in years: safety. Over the following days, Isaac continued to visit the mercantile, but something had shifted between them. Victoria was still wary, still careful, but she began asking him questions about his life, about the ranch where he worked, about how he had come to be a cowboy. Isaac answered readily, telling her about growing up in Colorado, about losing both parents to influenza when he was 19, about drifting south through various ranch jobs, until he landed the foreman position at the Circle K Ranch just outside Kelton. "You like the work?" Victoria asked one afternoon while measuring him for a new shirt he claimed to need. "I love it," Isaac said honestly, standing still while she worked the measuring tape around his shoulders. There is something about working with the land and the animals, about the freedom of riding out under open sky. It is a hard life, but it is honest, and I answer to no one but my own conscience and the man who pays my wages. It sounds lonely. Sometimes it is. But there is a difference between being alone and being lonely. I have good friends at the ranch, and the work is satisfying. Although, he added, his voice taking on a warmer tone, I have been feeling considerably less lonely since you arrived in Kelton. Victoria's hands stilled on the measuring tape. She was acutely aware of his proximity, of the solid warmth of him, of the clean scent of soap and leather. For the first time in years, being close to a man did not make her skin crawl with anxiety. Instead, she felt something else entirely, something fragile and frightening in its own way, the stirrings of attraction. "You should not say such things," she whispered. "Why not if they are true? Because I am not whole anymore. I am broken, damaged. You could have any woman you wanted, someone without all my fears and scars." Isaac slowly, carefully, reached up and gently took her hand, giving her plenty of time to pull away if she wanted. When she did not, he held her fingers lightly in his much larger hand. "Victoria, we are all scarred in one way or another. Life marks us, shapes us, sometimes breaks us down. But broken things can be mended, and often they are stronger for having been broken. You are not damaged. You are a survivor." She looked up at him then, really looked at him, and saw nothing but sincerity in those gray eyes. "I do not know how to do this. I do not know how to trust again." "Then we will take it slow. One day at a time, one moment at a time. I am not going anywhere, Victoria. I am willing to wait as long as it takes." From that day forward, their relationship began to shift and deepen. Isaac started inviting Victoria to simple, public outings where she would feel safe. They took walks along the railroad tracks in the evening when the heat had broken, always within sight of other people. They had dinner at the small restaurant in town, sitting across from each other in a booth by the window where everything was open and visible. Mrs. Carmichael became Victoria's unlikely confidante, encouraging the relationship while also making sure Victoria felt supported and protected. The older woman had guessed much of Victoria's history without being told, and she made sure that Isaac understood the responsibility he was taking on in courting a woman who had been so badly hurt. "You break her heart, boy, and you will answer to me, Mrs. Carmichael told him bluntly one morning when he came by the shop. "That girl has been through hell and back. She does not need more pain." "I have no intention of causing her pain, madam. I care about her deeply. Caring is not enough. You need patience, understanding, and the willingness to let her heal in her own time. Some days she will be fine, other days the ghosts will come back. You prepared for that?" Isaac met her eyes steadily. "Yes, madam, I am." August brought intense heat to the Utah desert, temperatures that made work brutal and sleep nearly impossible in the stifling bunkhouse. Isaac often found himself riding into town in the evenings just to escape the heat, and if he was being honest with himself, to see Victoria. One evening, they were sitting on the bench outside the mercantile, watching the sun paint the sky in brilliant oranges and purples as it set behind the mountains. Victoria had finally begun to relax around him, her posture less rigid, her smiles coming more freely. She was telling him about a dress she was making for a customer, her hands moving expressively as she described the particular challenge of the lace work, when Isaac reached up to adjust his hat. The movement was quick and casual, his hand rising toward his head, but Victoria's body betrayed her before her mind could process that she was safe. She flinched away from him sharply, her breath catching, her eyes going momentarily blank with fear. Isaac froze completely, his hand still raised halfway to his hat. For a heartbeat, they simply stayed there, frozen in that terrible tableau, the ghost of Victoria's past standing between them like a physical presence. Then Isaac very slowly lowered his hand and said in the gentlest voice Victoria had ever heard, "I was just reaching for my hat. The sun was in my eyes. I am so sorry I startled you." Victoria felt tears of shame burning in her eyes. They had been doing so well, she had been doing so well, and her body had still reacted with that ingrained fear response. "I am sorry. I thought I was past this." "Do not apologize," Isaac said firmly. He shifted on the bench to face her, but he kept his hands very visibly in his lap, making no move toward her. "Victoria, look at me, please." She forced herself to meet his eyes, expecting to see disappointment or frustration or pity. Instead, she saw only compassion and a fierce kind of tenderness that made her throat tight. "What you survived, what was done to you, it left marks. Not on your skin where everyone can see them, but on your soul, in your instincts. Those marks do not make you weak or broken. They are evidence that you endured something terrible and came through it, but they also do not define you. You are so much more than what was done to you. How can you be so patient with me? Most men would have given up by now." Isaac smiled, a soft expression that crinkled the corners of his eyes. "I am not most men, and you are worth every bit of patience I have and more. Victoria, I am falling in love with you. Not with some imaginary version of you that does not have fears or scars, but with the real you. The strong, resilient, beautiful woman who got on a stagecoach and traveled halfway across the country to start over. The woman who creates beauty with thread and needle. The woman who smiles at me like sunrise when she thinks I am not looking." Victoria felt like she could not breathe, but for the first time it was not from fear but from the overwhelming emotion flooding through her. "You love me." "I do. I know it might be too soon to say it, and I do not expect you to say it back until you are ready. But I want you to know, I want you to have no doubts about how I feel and what my intentions are. I want to court you properly, Victoria Daniels. I want to show you what it means to be cherished and respected. And someday, if you will have me, I want to marry you and spend the rest of my life proving that love does not have to hurt." The tears that had been threatening finally spilled over, tracking down Victoria's cheeks, but these were not tears of fear or shame. These were the tears of something tight and knotted in her chest finally beginning to unfurl, like a plant that had been kept in darkness finally reaching toward light. "I want that too," she whispered. "I am terrified, but I want it. I want to try." Isaac's smile was brilliant, transforming his entire face. "That is all I need. We will figure out the rest together." He did not try to touch her or kiss her, though Victoria could see in his eyes that he wanted to. Instead, he simply sat beside her on that bench as the stars began to emerge in the darkening sky, and they talked about their hopes and dreams until the night had fully fallen, and Mrs. Carmichael came to the door to remind Victoria that even courting couples needed to maintain proper hours. Over the following weeks, Isaac courted Victoria with a dedication and creativity that amazed her. He brought her books from the small lending library in town, having noticed she liked to read. He commissioned her to make him several new shirts, which gave them an excuse to spend time together during fittings. He introduced her to his friends from the ranch, good men who treated her with respect and who clearly thought the world of their foreman. Victoria, in turn, began to open up to Isaac about her past. It did not come all at once, but in small pieces, fragments of story shared in quiet moments. She told him about Robert, about the violence and the fear, about feeling trapped and powerless. Isaac listened without judgment, his jaw tight with suppressed anger at the man who had hurt her, but his eyes remained gentle when they rested on Victoria. "If he ever comes looking for you, he will have to go through me," Isaac said quietly one evening. "He will not come. He has probably already found someone else to control. Men like Robert, they want power over whoever is closest. With me gone, he will have moved on. But you are still afraid he might find you." It was not a question, and Victoria did not pretend otherwise. "Sometimes I wake up from nightmares where he has tracked me down and is dragging me back to Chicago. My rational mind knows it is unlikely, but fear is not always rational." "No, it is not. But you are not alone anymore, Victoria. You have me, you have Mrs. Carmichael, you have this whole town. We look after our own in Kelton, and you are one of us now." The sense of belonging those words gave her was almost overwhelming. Victoria had not realized how isolated she had felt, even in this new place, until Isaac offered her the gift of community and protection. As summer faded into autumn, Victoria's confidence grew. She began to truly settle into Kelton, making friends with other women in town, becoming known for her exceptional sewing skills and her fair prices. The money she earned gave her a sense of security and independence she had never had in her marriage, where Robert had controlled every penny. Isaac continued to court her with steadfast devotion, but he was always careful about physical contact, always letting her set the pace and initiate any touching. The first time Victoria reached for his hand while they were walking, threading her fingers through his, Isaac's heart felt like it might burst from his chest. That simple gesture of trust and affection meant more to him than any passionate embrace could have. Their first kiss came in late September, when the Utah heat had finally broken, and the evenings had turned cool enough to require a shawl. They had been attending a town dance, though Victoria had spent most of the evening watching rather than participating, still not comfortable with the close physical contact that dancing required. Isaac walked her home as the moon rose full and bright over the desert, casting everything in silver light. They paused outside the mercantile, and Victoria turned to him with an expression of such longing and nervousness that Isaac felt his breath catch. "I want you to kiss me," she said quietly. "But I am afraid I will not do it right, or that I will panic and ruin everything." Isaac stepped closer, but not quite into her space, giving her room to breathe. "There is no wrong way to kiss someone you care about, and if you panic, we stop. It is that simple, Victoria. You are in control here always." She nodded, then took a deep breath and closed the distance between them. Isaac stood very still, letting her come to him, and when she pressed her lips tentatively to his, he kissed her back with gentle reverence. It was soft and sweet and nothing like the demanding, bruising kisses Robert had forced on her. This was asking, not taking, sharing, not claiming. When Victoria pulled back, she was trembling, but not from fear. "That was nice. Can we do it again?" Isaac laughed, a warm sound full of joy, and cupped her face carefully in his hands. "We can do that as many times as you want." The second kiss was longer, deeper, and when it ended, Victoria felt like something fundamental had shifted inside her. She was reclaiming intimacy, rewriting the script that said touch had to mean pain. With Isaac, touch meant safety and warmth and the promise of something beautiful. "I love you," she said suddenly, the words bursting out of her like they had been locked away too long. "I did not think I could ever feel this way about anyone again, but I love you, Isaac Vaughn. I love your patience and your kindness and the way you make me feel like I am worth something." Isaac pulled her into his arms, holding her close but not tight, always aware of her need for the ability to escape if she felt trapped. "You are worth everything, Victoria, and I love you too, more than I have words to express." They stood there in the moonlight for a long time, simply holding each other, and Victoria felt something she had not felt in years, hope for a future that held joy instead of fear. October brought cooler weather and the beginning of preparations for winter. Isaac began talking seriously about marriage, about building them a house on the ranch property where he worked. The owner, a widower named Charles Morrison, had already given his blessing, pleased that his reliable foreman was settling down. But Victoria had concerns that needed to be addressed before she could fully commit to marriage. One evening, sitting in the small parlor of Mrs. Carmichael's quarters, where the older woman had given them privacy, Victoria finally broached the subject that had been weighing on her mind. "I need to tell you something before we go any further. I need you to understand what marriage to me might mean." Isaac took her hand, his thumb stroking gently over her knuckles. "Whatever it is, we will face it together. I do not know if I can bear children." Robert, he was violent in all ways, including in the marriage bed. There was damage, and a doctor told me it might have affected my ability to conceive. I know most men want sons, want a family. If I cannot give you that, you deserve to know now, before you are bound to me. Isaac was quiet for a moment, absorbing this information. Victoria held her breath, waiting for him to pull away to tell her that changed everything. Instead, he raised her hand to his lips and kissed her knuckles gently. "Victoria, I want to marry you because I love you, not because of what you can give me. If we are blessed with children someday, I will be grateful. If we are not, then we will have each other, and that will be enough. More than enough. You say that now, but what if you change your mind? What if you come to resent me? I will not. Listen to me, darling. I have thought about the life I want to build, and at the center of it is you, just you. Everything else is secondary. Besides, if we want a family and children do not come, there are always children who need homes, who need parents to love them. We have options. But none of that matters if you do not want to marry me." "I do want to marry you. I am just terrified of not being enough." Isaac pulled her into his lap, something he had only recently started doing, and only when she initiated the closeness. "You are enough. You have always been enough. That bastard in Chicago spent 2 years trying to convince you otherwise, but he was wrong. You are strong and capable and worthy of love, exactly as you are." Victoria buried her face in his shoulder and let herself cry, releasing years of pent-up pain and fear. Isaac held her through it, one hand stroking her back in soothing circles, murmuring soft reassurances into her hair. When the storm had passed, Victoria felt lighter than she had in years. "Marry me," Isaac said softly. "Marry me and let me spend every day proving to you how remarkable you are." "Yes," Victoria whispered. "Yes, I will marry you." They were married in November of 1883 in a simple ceremony at the small church in Kelton. Victoria wore a dress she had made herself, a beautiful creation of ivory silk with delicate lace at the collar and cuffs. Mrs. Carmichael stood up with her, and Samuel Torres served as Isaac's best man. The entire town seemed to have turned out for the wedding, a testament to how much both Victoria and Isaac had become integral parts of the community. When the preacher asked if anyone objected to the union, Victoria felt her heart stutter with sudden panic. Part of her expected Robert to materialize from thin air, to claim her and drag her back. But the church remained quiet except for the shuffling of feet and clearing of throats, and the ceremony continued without incident. Isaac's vows were simple but heartfelt. "Victoria, I promise to honor you, protect you, and cherish you for all the days of my life. I promise to be patient with your fears and celebrate your victories. I promise to build you a home where you will always feel safe, and to love you with everything I am." Victoria's voice shook as she spoke her own vows. "Isaac, I promise to trust you with my heart, even though it is scarred and imperfect. I promise to build a life with you based on honesty and respect. I promise to love you fiercely, and to never take for granted the gift of your patience and understanding. You saved me, not by rescuing me like some damsel in a story, but by showing me I was strong enough to save myself. When Isaac kissed her as his wife, there was not a dry eye in the church. The house Isaac had been building on the Morrison Ranch was not quite finished when they married, so they spent their first weeks of marriage in a small cabin on the property that had previously been used for storage. Isaac had cleaned it thoroughly and furnished it with a bed, a table, chairs, and a cast iron stove. It was simple but clean and private, and to Victoria it felt like a palace. Their wedding night was an exercise in patience and communication. Victoria was terrified, her memories of forced intimacy with Robert creating a barrier of anxiety that she desperately wanted to overcome. Isaac understood this, and he went slow, constantly checking in with her, making sure she was comfortable and willing with every touch, every caress, every progression. "We do not have to do anything you are not ready for," he told her as they lay together in the darkness, both still fully clothed. "We have the rest of our lives. There is no rush. I want to be a proper wife to you. I want to share this with you. I am just so afraid I will freeze up or have a panic attack and ruin everything." Isaac propped himself up on one elbow and looked down at her in the moonlight filtering through the window. "Victoria, you could never ruin anything. This is supposed to be about love and connection, not obligation or duty. We only do what feels right for both of us." They spent that night simply holding each other, talking and kissing and slowly exploring the boundaries of comfort and desire. Isaac let Victoria set every boundary, never pushing, always responsive to her cues. By the time the sun rose, they had not consummated their marriage in the traditional sense, but Victoria felt closer to Isaac than she had ever felt to another human being. Over the following weeks, their physical relationship developed gradually and naturally. Victoria found that with Isaac, intimacy could be gentle and loving rather than violent and degrading. There were still moments when something would trigger a memory, and she would have to ask him to stop, but Isaac never made her feel guilty or inadequate. He simply held her until the panic passed, and they would continue only when she was ready. By December, Victoria was settling into her new life with a sense of contentment she had never known was possible. She continued her sewing work, now taking clients from surrounding ranches and farms as her reputation for fine needlework spread. Isaac worked long days on the ranch but always came home to her in the evenings, and they would share simple dinners and talk about their days. The new house was finished in January of 1884, and moving into it felt like the final piece of Victoria's new life falling into place. It was a modest frame house with 2 bedrooms, a kitchen, a parlor, and even a small room Victoria could use for her sewing. Isaac had built it with his own hands, with help from the other ranch hands, and every nail and board represented his love and commitment to their future. Mrs. Carmichael visited often, having become something of a surrogate mother to Victoria. The older woman was delighted to see how happy and healthy Victoria looked, no longer the frightened, haunted woman who had stepped off the stage coach the previous June. "He is a good man, your Isaac, Mrs. Carmichael said one afternoon as they sat in Victoria's parlor, working on a complicated dress order together. "I am glad you found each other. So am I. Some days I can hardly believe this is my life now. I keep waiting for something terrible to happen, for it all to be taken away." "That is the past talking, child. You are safe now. You have built yourself a good life here with a man who adores you and a community that values you. Let yourself be happy." Victoria was learning to do exactly that. As winter deepened and snow occasionally dusted the Utah landscape, she found herself laughing more, smiling easily, sleeping through the night without nightmares. Isaac's love was a steady, constant thing, and it was slowly teaching her that she was worthy of gentleness and respect. Spring of 1884 brought new life to the ranch and unexpected news for Victoria. She had been feeling poorly for several weeks, exhausted and queasy, and Mrs. Carmichael had finally convinced her to see the doctor who visited Kelton once a month from the larger town of Careen. Dr. Patterson examined her thoroughly, then sat back with a smile. "Mrs. Vaughn, you are pregnant. I would estimate about 3 months along, which puts you due in late summer or early fall." Victoria felt like all the air had left the room. "That is not possible. I was told I might not be able to have children because of previous injuries." "Well, the human body has remarkable healing capabilities, especially when given time and the right circumstances. You are definitely expecting, and from what I can see, you are quite healthy. Of course, given your history, we will want to monitor you carefully throughout the pregnancy, but I see no reason you should not carry to term and deliver a healthy baby." Victoria left the examination in a daze. She had not let herself hope for this, had convinced herself that children were not in her future. Now she was faced with the reality that in a few months she would be a mother. The prospect was equal parts terrifying and thrilling. When Isaac came home that evening, dusty and tired from a long day of spring branding, Victoria met him at the door with tears streaming down her face. Isaac immediately went into crisis mode, thinking something terrible had happened. "What is wrong? Are you hurt? Did something happen?" "I am pregnant," Victoria managed through her tears. "We are going to have a baby." Isaac stared at her for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Then his face split into the biggest smile she had ever seen, and he let out a whoop of joy that probably carried halfway to town. He picked her up and spun her around, then immediately set her down carefully, worried he had been too rough. "A baby. We are going to have a baby. Victoria, this is incredible. How are you feeling? Are you well? What did the doctor say?" Victoria laughed at his string of anxious questions. "I am fine, we are fine. The doctor said I am healthy and the pregnancy looks normal. Isaac, I was so sure this could not happen. I thought I was too damaged." "You were never damaged, darling, just healing. And now we are getting this amazing gift." He placed his hand gently on her still flat stomach. "Thank you. Thank you for trusting me enough to build this life with me." The pregnancy progressed smoothly, though Victoria dealt with significant morning sickness in the early months. Isaac was attentive to the point of being almost comically overprotective, constantly worrying about her doing too much or lifting anything heavy. Victoria found his concern endearing, even when it drove her a bit crazy. As her belly grew round with their child, Victoria found herself experiencing yet another shift in her relationship with her own body. For years, her body had felt like a betrayal, a thing that had been damaged and hurt and had not fought back. But now, feeling the baby move and grow inside her, she began to see her body as strong and capable of creating life. Summer brought intense heat again, and Victoria spent much of her time in the relative cool of the house, sewing baby clothes and preparing the nursery in the second bedroom. Mrs. Carmichael and the other ranch wives threw her a party, bringing gifts of blankets and gowns, and offering advice about childbirth and motherhood. In September of 1884, after a labor that lasted through an entire night and well into the next day, Victoria gave birth to a healthy baby boy. Isaac was there for all of it, holding her hand, wiping her face with cool cloths, supporting her through the pain and exhaustion. When the doctor finally placed their son in Victoria's arms, she looked down at the tiny, perfect face and felt something break open inside her chest. "He is beautiful," Isaac whispered, tears running unashamedly down his face as he looked at his wife and child. "You are amazing. You did so well, darling." They named him James Morrison Vaughn, the middle name in honor of Isaac's employer who had become like a father to them both. James had his mother's green eyes and his father's dark hair, and from the moment he entered the world, he was clearly loved beyond measure. Motherhood brought new challenges, and joys Victoria had not anticipated. The exhaustion was real and sometimes overwhelming, but so was the fierce protective love she felt for her son. Isaac was a devoted father, rising with Victoria for midnight feedings, changing diapers without complaint, and spending every moment he was not working bonding with his boy. As James grew from infant to toddler, Victoria found that the last shadows of her past were finally beginning to lift. She no longer startled at sudden movements, no longer had nightmares about Robert finding her. Her life was full and rich, and centered around her family and her work and her community. In the summer of 1886, Victoria realized she was pregnant again. This pregnancy was easier than the first, perhaps because she knew what to expect, perhaps because she was not carrying the weight of fear and doubt. In March of 1887, she gave birth to a daughter they named Rose Helen Vaughn, the middle name after Mrs. Carmichael, who had become the grandmother figure in their lives. Isaac was ecstatic to have a daughter, and he doted on Rose with the same fierce devotion he showed James. Watching Isaac play with their children, hearing him read them stories in the evenings, seeing the gentle patience he showed them even when they were fussy or difficult, Victoria fell in love with him all over again every single day. The years passed in a rhythm of seasons and milestones. James learned to ride before he was 5, following his father around the ranch like a miniature shadow. Rose proved to have her mother's talent with needle and thread, creating elaborate outfits for her dolls before she was 8 years old. Victoria's sewing business continued to thrive, and Isaac was eventually given a partnership stake in the ranch when Charles Morrison decided to semi-retire. In 1889, when James was 5 and Rose was 2, Victoria received a letter that had been forwarded through several addresses before finally reaching her in Kelton. It was from her sister in Chicago, and the news it contained was both shocking and liberating. Robert Hayes had died, killed in a drunken brawl outside a saloon. Her sister wanted Victoria to know that she was truly free now, no longer needing to look over her shoulder or worry about being found. Victoria read the letter twice, then walked out to where Isaac was working in the barn repairing a saddle. He looked up as she entered, immediately reading the complex emotions on her face. "What happened? Robert is dead. My sister wrote to tell me. He died in a bar fight 2 months ago." Isaac carefully set down the leather he had been working and came to her. "How do you feel about that?" Victoria thought about it honestly. "Relief, mostly. Guilt that I feel relieved about someone dying. But also, I realize something. He stopped having power over me years ago. When I married you, when I built this life, when I had our children, I took back everything he tried to steal from me. Knowing he is dead changes nothing about who I am now." Isaac pulled her into his arms and she melted into his embrace. "I am proud of you. You have grown so strong, become so fully yourself. You are an amazing wife, mother, businesswoman, friend. Everything you are, you built despite what was done to you." "No," Victoria corrected, pulling back to look up at him. "Not despite, because of. I would never wish what happened to me on anyone, but I also cannot regret the path that led me here, to you, to our family, to this life. Every scar, every fear I overcame, it all shaped me into someone strong enough to accept love when it was offered, strong enough to believe I deserved happiness." They stood together in the barn, holding each other in the dusty golden light filtering through the slats, and Victoria felt a sense of peace settle over her like a benediction. The past was finally, truly past. The future stretched before her bright with promise. In 1892, Victoria and Isaac celebrated their 9th wedding anniversary with a party at their home. The house had been expanded over the years, with additional rooms added as their family and prosperity grew. Their property was thriving, their children were healthy and happy, and they were surrounded by friends who had become family. Mrs. Carmichael, now quite elderly but still sharp as ever, raised a toast to the couple. To Isaac and Victoria, who proved that the best love stories are built on trust, patience, and the courage to start over. May you have many more years of happiness together. As everyone cheered and drank, Victoria caught Isaac's eye across the room. He smiled at her, that same warm, gentle smile that had captured her heart years ago, and she smiled back, pouring into that look all the love and gratitude she felt. Later that night, after the guests had gone home and the children were asleep, Victoria and Isaac sat together on the porch, watching the stars wheel slowly overhead. The desert night was cool and clear, and the sounds of crickets and distant cattle created a peaceful symphony. "Do you ever regret it?" Victoria asked quietly. Taking on a damaged woman and all her baggage, Isaac turned to her with exasperation and fondness in equal measure. "Victoria Vaughn, after 9 years of marriage and 2 children, are you still asking me that question?" "Maybe I need to hear the answer again." He pulled her close, tucking her against his side. "I have never regretted a single moment. You were not damaged, you were wounded, and there is a difference. Wounds heal. And you have healed so beautifully, darling. The woman you are now, strong and confident and full of joy, she was always inside you, just waiting for a safe place to emerge. I am honored that you chose to let me be that safe place. You were exactly what I needed when I needed it most. A gentle man who showed me that kindness was not a trap. You saved my life, Isaac, in every way that matters. And you saved mine. I was drifting before you, going through the motions of living but not really feeling alive. You gave me purpose, family, love. We saved each other, Victoria." She turned in his arms and kissed him, a slow, deep kiss that still made her heart race even after years together. When they pulled apart, she rested her forehead against his. "I love you, Isaac Vaughn. I will love you until the day I die and probably beyond that. I love you too, Victoria. Always and forever." The years continued to unfold with all the joys and challenges of life. James grew into a fine young man, inheriting his father's work ethic and his mother's compassion. He eventually took over much of the daily operation of the ranch, allowing Isaac to slow down a bit as he aged. Rose married a schoolteacher from Corrine and gave Victoria and Isaac 3 grandchildren who visited often and filled the house with laughter. Victoria's sewing business evolved over time, and she eventually took on apprentices, teaching young women the skills that had given her independence and purpose. She never talked about her first marriage publicly, but she had a reputation for being especially kind and helpful to women who seemed to be in difficult situations, and more than one woman found her way to safety with Victoria's quiet assistance. Isaac remained devoted to Victoria throughout their long marriage, never taking for granted the gift of her trust and love. He continued to be consciously gentle in his movements, careful with his words, attentive to her needs. Even in their later years, when Victoria's occasional flinches had long since faded to nothing, he maintained the habits of tenderness that had defined their relationship from the beginning. In the spring of 1910, Victoria and Isaac celebrated their 27th wedding anniversary. They were in their late 40s now, with silver threading through their hair and lines of laughter and sun etched into their faces. Their children were grown with families of their own, The ranch was prosperous, and they had built a life that exceeded anything Victoria had dared to dream when she stepped off that stagecoach in Kelton all those years ago. They took a trip to celebrate, traveling by train to California to see the ocean, something neither of them had ever done. Standing on the beach with the vast Pacific stretching to the horizon, Victoria thought about how far she had come from that frightened, broken woman who fled Chicago. "What are you thinking about?" Isaac asked, his arm around her waist as they watched the waves roll in. "About how impossible this all seemed once. I remember the first time you came into the mercantile, and I was so afraid of you even though you were nothing but kind. If someone had told me then that we would be here now, married nearly 3 decades with children and grandchildren, I would not have believed them." "I knew," Isaac said with quiet confidence. "Maybe not the specifics, but I knew you were going to be important in my life from the moment I saw you. I felt it here." He placed his hand over his heart. "You were so patient with me. I do not know if I ever properly thanked you for that. You thank me every day by being happy, by building this life with me, by trusting me with your heart. That is all the thanks I have ever needed or wanted." They returned to Kelton after 2 weeks, both pleased to be home. The town had grown over the years, with the railroad bringing more people and commerce, but it still retained the close-knit community feeling that had made it a sanctuary for Victoria all those years ago. Mrs. Carmichael had passed away the previous year at the age of 86, leaving the mercantile to Victoria in her will. Victoria had sold the business to a young couple just starting out, but she kept the small apartment above it, using it as a workspace for her sewing and a quiet place to retreat when she needed solitude. The years continued their steady march. In 1915, the world was embroiled in a war that seemed very distant from their quiet corner of Utah, though they felt its effects in rising prices and young men leaving to fight. James, now 31, was too old and too essential to the ranch to be conscripted, for which Victoria was quietly grateful. In 1920, Victoria turned 56 years old, and Isaac planned a surprise party that brought together family and friends from all over the region. Standing in their crowded parlor, surrounded by the people she loved and who loved her in return, Victoria was overwhelmed with gratitude for the life she had been given. Rose pulled her aside during the party. "Mother, I want to tell you something. I am proud to be your daughter. The way you survived what you went through, the way you built this family and this life, it taught me that women are strong, that we do not have to accept cruelty or diminishment. You showed me what real love looks like by the marriage you and Father have. I hope I am building something half as good with Thomas." Victoria hugged her daughter tightly, tears pricking her eyes. "You are building something wonderful, sweetheart, and I am so proud of the woman you have become." As the party wound down and guests began to leave, Isaac found Victoria on the porch, taking a moment of quiet in the cool evening air. "There you are. I was wondering where you had disappeared to. Just taking it all in. It is a lot of people and noise, even when it is people I love." Isaac settled into the chair next to her. "It is a good life we have built, is it not? It is the best life. You know, I was thinking about that moment, the one that changed everything. Do you remember? I flinched when you raised your hand, and you froze and explained you were just reaching for your hat. I remember. How could I forget? That was the moment I realized how deeply you had been hurt, and the moment I decided I was going to spend as long as it took to help you heal. That moment of gentleness, of understanding, it cracked open the door I had slammed shut around my heart. You could have been frustrated or annoyed with my overreaction, but instead you were kind. You saw my fear and you met it with compassion. That was when I started to believe that maybe not all men were like Robert, that maybe I could trust again. Isaac reached over and took her hand, their fingers interlacing with the practiced ease of decades. "I am glad I reached for my hat that day. I am glad you gave me the chance to prove I was different. I am glad for every moment that led us to this life we share." "So am I, my love. So am I." They sat together in comfortable silence, watching the sun set in brilliant colors over the Utah landscape they both loved. Inside, they could hear their grandchildren playing, their voices high and bright with laughter. The sounds of family, of life, of joy earned through patience and courage. In 1925, Victoria and Isaac celebrated their 42nd wedding anniversary. Isaac's health had begun to decline, his joints stiff with arthritis and his breathing sometimes labored. But his mind remained sharp, and his devotion to Victoria never wavered. They spent their days quietly now, often sitting together in the parlor, Victoria sewing while Isaac read aloud to her from the newspaper or books. "You remember the first time I told you I loved you?" Isaac asked one autumn afternoon. "Of course. We were sitting on the bench outside the mercantile, and you told me you were falling in love with the real me, scars and fears and all. That was the truth then, and it is still the truth now. Every year with you has been a gift, Victoria. Every moment, even the difficult ones, has been worth it because I got to spend them with you." Victoria set down her sewing and moved to sit beside him, taking his weathered hand in hers. "You made me believe in love again, Isaac. You made me believe in myself. Everything good in my life, everything beautiful, it all started the day you walked into that shop and showed me what kindness looked like. We were both lucky, darling. Lucky to find each other, lucky to have the time we have had." They kissed, gentle and sweet, a benediction and a promise that even after more than 4 decades, their love remained strong and true. Isaac passed away peacefully in his sleep in the spring of 1927, 2 weeks after their 44th anniversary. Victoria was devastated by the loss, but she took comfort in knowing that they had lived a full life together, that their love had been real and deep and lasting. She mourned him deeply, but without regret, because every day with Isaac had been exactly what she needed it to be. Victoria lived another 15 years after Isaac's death, surrounded by her children, grandchildren, and eventually great-grandchildren. She continued her sewing work until her eyes grew too dim, and she spent her final years telling stories to the young ones about the cowboy who had shown her what real love meant. When Victoria Daniels Vaughn died in 1942 at the age of 78, she was laid to rest beside Isaac in the Kelton cemetery. On her gravestone, beneath her name and dates, James had inscribed a simple epitaph that captured the essence of his mother's life. She was afraid, and then she was brave, and then she was free. The story of Victoria and Isaac became something of a legend in Kelton, passed down through generations as an example of how love could heal even the deepest wounds, how patience and kindness could overcome fear, and how two people who found each other at exactly the right moment could build something beautiful and lasting. Their descendants continued to work the ranch for decades, each generation adding to the legacy that Victoria and Isaac had begun. The house they had built together stood for nearly a century, sheltering families and love stories of its own, a testament to the foundation of trust and compassion on which it had been constructed. And though the years passed and memories faded, the truth at the heart of their story remained constant. That love did not have to hurt, that gentleness was a form of strength, and that sometimes salvation came not from being rescued, but from being given the safety and space to rescue yourself. Victoria's journey from a frightened woman fleeing Chicago to a confident matriarch surrounded by love had been long and difficult, marked by pain and healing in equal measure. But it had been worth it. Every moment of fear overcome, every wall carefully dismantled, every step toward trust rewarded with Isaac's steady presence and unwavering devotion. In the end, that single moment when Victoria flinched and Isaac froze, explaining he was just reaching for his hat, had become the cornerstone of a love story that spanned decades and touched countless lives. It was proof that the smallest acts of kindness could change everything, that patience was its own form of love, and that healing was always possible when someone cared enough to help carry the burden. Their story was one of hope in the face of despair, of love conquering fear, of two souls finding each other across the vast expanse of the American West and building something that would outlast them both. It was a testament to the power of choosing gentleness over force, understanding over judgment, and compassion over indifference. And long after Victoria and Isaac were gone, their love story continued to inspire, a reminder that even the deepest scars could heal, that broken trust could be rebuilt, and that the best kind of love was the kind that made you feel safe enough to finally, completely, be yourself.